Hello! Well, this video is really about how to choose quotations and then how to write about them. I'm making it specifically for It's Me, a subscriber who's written to me to ask if I can make a video on Jane Eyre. Well, I'm not teaching Jane Eyre at the minute, but the skills that I show you with Jane Eyre will be relevant to whatever text you're doing. So I've copied her posting into Word so that we can examine it. But as always, we need to start with the mark scheme. So what's really cool about the mark scheme is that this is the mark scheme for paper 1, and the wording is exactly the same as the mark scheme for paper 2. And that's great news because it means that every time you do a literature question, it's pretty much asking you to do the same thing. So there are 3 assessment objectives, and let's go in reverse order. The examiners want you to consider the context, and that's not just the context of when it was written, but it's also the context of a modern reader. Assessment objective 2 wants you to look at the methods, and when you're writing about the methods, you have to name what the techniques are, because you've got to use the right terminology. And then if we go up to the most difficult assessment objective, you're asked to be conceptualized, and to do that you have to examine the writer's purpose. So a concept is an idea. So basically this is just saying, what's the author's big idea here? And do you have precise references, precise quotations to analyze that? Well, the task I set this viewer was simple. I said to her, pick a quotation for the main character Jane, then pick a quotation for the main antagonist. So Jane would be the protagonist, the main character. The antagonist, if you like, is her foil, the character that she's juxtaposed to, which is Rochester. And then choose a quotation for the ending of the book. And I asked her to look at writing something about each of those assessment objectives. And if you write something for all 3 of those, you'll always be at the top of the mark scheme. So, I am no bird, and no net ensnares me. I'm a free human being with an independent will. So straight in, I can link this to the conceptualized approach. What is the big idea? Well, one way of looking at this is saying the whole novel is feminist fiction, and the story of Jane Eyre is about trying to break social convention, taking a comparatively ordinary girl who seems to be destined only to be a governess. She's plain, not very attractive, and highly unlikely to find a suitable husband, and yet she manages to meet the man who she most desires. She falls in love with him, and even though he's a completely different class, they end up together. And this is because Jane sees herself as a free human being with an independent will. I can nip into the context here because by saying herself as a free human being, she's saying that women and men are equal, and that she can be independent in a social time where when you married a husband, you effectively became his property. And interestingly, Rochester has a wife already who he keeps locked in the attic, the very image of a male society keeping someone as their property. And don't forget to use the word patriarchal to describe a society controlled by males. Okay, well, let's see how our viewer has done. Jane expresses her desire to be independent, which was not common for women in the Victorian era. Good, she's straight in on the context. The net may represent the conventions of society. Brilliant. That subject terminology represent here. She could have used it as a metaphor or symbol, which Jane breaks. There is a motif of birds in the book. So motif again is subject terminology. And birds are often cage, which Jane has felt like throughout her life. So these are very good points. They do cover the 3 assessment objectives. However, each of them is very brief, and only one of them focuses in on a single word quotation. So to get the full marks, you really need to explore each of these brilliant ideas in more detail by looking at the individual words in the quotation. You could look at the use of repetition here, and it might be that you're arguing Jane has to repeat herself so forcefully because actually society is ensnaring her, and that's why she's fighting so hard against it. You might look at the bird image, that motif, and see it as an image of freedom, and this is Jane acknowledging that she is no bird, she doesn't have freedom. Or alternatively, you could see this as a belittling metaphor where women are treated as birds and therefore breakable and fragile, and she is much sturdier than that and wishes a different motif to describe her. And obviously, you're reaching towards that here when you're saying the bird motif is only there to show how birds aren't free but are actually caged. This would be a more developed point if you take the point about Jane, but then say how she is representative of female society at the time. So all of womankind is, if you like, caged by the social conventions. Okay, let's have a look at the quotation for Rochester. For man's opinion, I defy it. Rochester is a Byronic hero. Well, that's very good, but what words in the quotation are you going to link that to? And what does Byronic hero mean? Well, Byron is a hero with much advantage. He's a lord, and he is considered the most attractive man of his day. But he also completely attacked society's conventions. You just mentioned that, but you've not explained how. And then it's really difficult now to say how Rochester attacks society's conventions, because actually he's much more a product of society on the face of it. And if you could show how he's defying society's conventions, that would be much more interesting. You could talk about his first marriage, for example. And another discussion is, he locks his wife up who's mad, but isn't that a conventional thing to do? Lock up the mad and not take care of them. Or you could decide that he does go against convention when he decides to have a bigamous marriage with Jane. But whatever you do, once you introduce an idea like this, you've really got to explore it. And then you've got to link that to Bronte's purpose. Is she saying that all men should be rebellious against the conventions of society? Or is she arguing that men shouldn't rebel against society, they should just invent different conventions? For example, one convention might be to marry for love rather than within your social class. That would not necessarily break society's conventions. It would just replace one convention with a different one. Or is she arguing that actually we shouldn't have conventions in society, we should just have moral behaviour? But if we do, Byron certainly doesn't have moral behaviour. Does she think that Rochester does? Or when we get to the ending of the novel, does she punish him for his immoral behaviour? In fact, does Bronte reinforce social convention by punishing those who have been sinful? Whatever your decision, you've got the brilliant idea here. You must explore it, otherwise you're not going to get the grade. Because look, right at the top, exploratory is what the examiner's after. And that's not what you're not doing. You've kind of got a tick list of things that you want to mention, but you're not exploring them, and that's why you're not getting the grade that you want. And then you've written the hyphen highlights the contrast between Rochester and society. Yes, it does here, because you're saying society is man's opinion. But when he defies it, how how real is that defiance? Or actually, does he end up simply going along with what social expectation is? You decide that for yourself, but you have to explore that again. You can't just make the statement and leave it there. For the end of the book, reader, I married him. The personal pronoun I makes the sentence active instead of passive. This would be shocking for Victorian readers and shows Jane's independence. Well, for this to work, you're right, by the way, but for this to work, you've really got to talk about how women were proposed to by men. They became the property of men. But here, she has taken full control and therefore subverted, or if you like, inverted, turned on its head, the social convention. I know it doesn't seem like it, but I'm an A-star student not getting an A-star. Well, it's because here you've not covered all of the assessment objectives either. So the main thing I've been telling you all the way through this is that you make brilliant statements, but you don't explore them. But you now have to consider all three assessment objectives. And finally, I've asked you to get a quotation from the ending because that quotation at the end will always be relevant to whatever the question is. And a double whammy, if you like, a double benefit of having a quotation from the end of the novel is that this is where the writer makes their purpose most clear. So let's explore that. Jane is only able to marry Rochester once Bronte has punished him. She's burned him. She's given him just one arm. I think she's blinded him as well, hasn't she? She's really attacked him. So is this Bronte's way of saying that men are so powerful compared to women that the only way a woman can be equal to them is if they're maimed and disabled and denied one of their senses? So is this her metaphor for saying that's how you treat women, which is, if you like, much worse than the caged bird? So that's one political interpretation that you could have. The other one could be a moral one, where his sinfulness in his treatment of his first wife and then being prepared to go against God in marrying Jane is punished here from a religious perspective. So that's another way of looking at it. It could be a profoundly Christian way to punish him, and it's only then that Jane can marry him as an equal. And another way is looking at the ending and thinking, well, actually the ending is completely implausible for its day. You know, for starters, Jane is summoned to Rochester by some kind of supernatural vision and voice, and she arrives just in time to discover her man half destroyed by fire. The very unlikeliness of this could be a way of criticising society. It could be Bronte saying, look, we all know that no woman is ever allowed to be independent in our society, and no woman is ever allowed true freedom. And finally, what she does to Rochester could be a metaphor for her extreme anger at the patriarchal society. Now, I'm sure you've been taught that Jane Eyre wasn't originally published under the name Charlotte Bronte. In order to get the book published, she felt she had to become a man, and therefore she named herself Currer Bell. So that ties in exactly with the point that we're making at the end, that this is an attack on the patriarchy, an attack on male power in society that prevents women from flourishing. And therefore the book itself, if you like, becomes the caged bird. And the only way for the bird to escape is for Charlotte Bronte to pretend to be male. Okay, so this has been a near 15-minute video, and if you just think of the words that I've used, all right, they've been spoken, they would easily take up a whole essay. And that's definitely exploratory, It's always been conceptualized because we're tying it into Charlotte Bronte's purpose. The references are very precise because we've basically looked at 3 quotations. In an essay, this would be more than 3 quotations because you're looking at individual words inside those. Now, obviously, I'm not suggesting that you'd only write about 3 quotations. You'd have more, and you wouldn't have to write about all 3 assessment objectives for each one. But I'm trying to show you how you can do and therefore hit the top mark. I've also tried to show you how to be really efficient by committing to memory the most important quotations for each character and also for the ending. So for your revision, you'll probably want another quotation for each of the main characters. So you've got 2, and then maybe pick 3 other characters and have 1 quotation each for them. And that will give you about 8 quotations, easily enough for an essay, and very manageable, isn't it? 8 quotations you could learn probably in about 15 minutes, to be honest, and they would serve you for any single essay on the novel. So hopefully you found that very useful if you're studying Jane Eyre, but if you've been following the skills, you'll find it very useful, whatever the novel. So, good luck and keep revising. Don't forget to subscribe.